Data transfer objects, also known as DTOs. Should we use them? Should we avoid them? When should we use them? All of those are valid questions. A DTO is a pure representation of data. One definition that I like is the one by Martin Fowler, where he says that a DTO is an object that has the responsibility of carrying data from one process to the other, with the goal of avoiding a static conversation between those two processes. From this explanation, we can see that a DTO is something that will sit on the boundaries of our system. It's important to clarify that a DTO is not only an object with a suffix DTO. Likely you have been using DTOs all the time on things like view models, messaging contracts, commands, events. All those kind of things are different shapes of a DTO. But DTOs is not loved by everyone. Some people love them and overuse them sometimes. Others will hate them and try to avoid it at all costs. But in fact, the decision of using or not DTOs is a trade-off as many other decisions in our field. Let me show you the good things on DTOs. I have here a small example for us. Here what you can see is a simple task controller. On this task controller we have two endpoints, a get and a post. Okay, we are using entity framework. Okay, we have here our DB context, storing in memory for now. And here we have our model. Okay, is it the task? The task has an ID, a title, and a description. It's a simple example. So the way that this application works is something like this. You get a request on your controller. That controller is exposing this task object that we have here. So we are using and exposing our model. And it's exactly the same model that goes into entity framework. So we are using the same definition of what a task is everywhere. If we run the application, we'll get this Swagger page. And here you can see that on the definition of what is exposed, because we are looking to that task model, we have, for example, the ID, the title, description, looks fine to me. But then if you go into the post, you go here and you see, for example, the ID. That is something that in fact I want to be built inside of my domain model. I don't want my clients sending me the ID. I don't want that to be their concern at all. So one of the advantages of using a DTO is that we can use it to abstract our clients from unnecessary complexity. So if I want this ID being part of a get endpoint, but not on a post, I can craft specific contracts for each endpoint. Another benefit of using a DTO is that when I'm exposing my model, now I can't change anything on that model because I have a contract and my model became my contract. I don't want my internal data structures, my internal implementation to be a contract with the outside, because on that case, I can't evolve it. For example, imagine that I want to change this description to something as nodes. Now, by changing this, I break the contracts of everyone that is depending on this nodes property. If I have third parties consuming this contract, you can see where this is going. So how can we solve that with DTOs? Let's bring here a folder named contract. Once again, you don't need to use the suffix DTO. You can name it view models, whatever you want. On this case, I will name it task response. I add the properties of that task, and I will rename these nodes to description to not break the contract that I have with my clients. So description, but I still have this problem that I'm exposing an ID. So what can I do instead? I create a new contract that will be a task request. And on this case, I only have the title and the description. So now it's as simple as going to our controller. We change the data type that is coming in, but now we need to map from this contract to the model. I'm doing it inline right here, but obviously you can do this in different ways. You can use a framework for that. You can create your extension methods. There's multiple ways on approaching these mappers. As you can see here, I'm mapping the description to the nodes. So I'm protecting the outside from the internal change. And let's do the same for the get, and it's done. So now I refactored my application to protect my outside consumers from internal changes. This is quite useful because breaking a contract with a third party is something that we should always avoid. But also, sometimes we may not break it because we are bringing new properties, but we may be exposing more things that we want. And once we expose them, they become a contract. What I demonstrate to you is how to use DTOs to protect your contract with the outside through an API, for example. But in fact, the idea of DTO is not only for APIs and for things that are consuming our application. You can also use it to protect process communications from things that you have underneath you. Things like, for example, a database or a third-party API, for example. As an example, let's imagine this use case. Let's imagine that we want to publish a new event every time that we have a new task on the system. This could be an event, this could be a service call, whatever, or even our own database if we want to protect changes on that space. So on this case, as you can see, I'm sending this model.task. If on the implementation of this iTask event publisher, I'm using the exact model, serializing it and sending it, once I change the payload from description to nodes, I will also start producing events in a different contract that I was supposed to do. So what you can do is using DTOs on that case as well. This means that you can use DTOs to control the inbound and outbound of data of your system. If you have watched me talking about hexagonal architecture, I talk a lot about this kind of things, where everything that is important in your application is inside of the hexagon, and you want to protect that hexagon from the outside, but also on the other way around. You don't want a change on the inside of your application to affect the relationships with the outside. But those are the good things on using DTOs. There's also bad things when you use DTOs. For example, now I have a lot of duplication. When I need to introduce a new feature in my application, let's imagine that I want to have a new property regarding my tasks. That means that if I go here, for example, and I introduce a property that is the owner on my model, now it means that to expose this through the API, I also need to go to several places to replicate this change. I need to go to my contracts, to both of them in this case, and I might need to go to my events that are on my publisher to refresh that using this owner eventually. So by using DTOs, I increase the duplication of artifacts inside of my source code. Therefore, I reduce the maintainability of this application. The other problem with DTOs is that they often are overused. It's common to see applications with multiple layers, and you start seeing DTOs being used on each layer to facilitate the communication. So on those cases, you have mappers after mappers after mappers, and things become unmanageable at all. And you are not getting the benefits that a DTO gives you, because a DTO will give you a benefit on protecting yourself from the outside, from the inbound and outbound of data. By the way, you can grab the source code as a patron. At this time, you may already notice that using a DTO is completely a trade-off. On one hand, by introducing a DTO, you reduce the coupling, so you increase the maintainability. On the other hand, by introducing a DTO, you increase the duplication, so you reduce the maintainability of the application. That's why you shouldn't trust anyone that says to you that this is the only way of doing it. Next time that you think about using a DTO, make sure you evaluate that trade-off between complexity, third-party dependencies, risk of change, all those kind of things that put DTOs on a place where it's not only good or only bad things. I would love to hear from you. What do you think about DTOs? On which cases are you using it? Please leave a comment and let me know. And by the way, my friends at YouTube, they think that you should watch this video right here. I will see you soon, and in the meanwhile, keep it simple.